If you're a man who has felt the debilitating pain of premature ejaculation in your life and you are searching for the solution, this episode is for you. Today we're going to be discussing the epidemic of premature ejaculation in men, why this issue is so prevalent. We'll look at the root causes of the issue, where the mainstream medical approach and doctors fail in providing lasting solutions, as well as the ultimate cure that men need in order to heal this issue once and for all. If you're new here, welcome to The Conscious Masculine. My name is Jasper Brown, and really for the last several years, I've been on a path of developing a more conscious relationship with my sexuality. It was the pain and confusion that I felt in this area of my life, which was actually one of the major motivators for me to start exploring personal growth and development in the first place. As a man going through my mid-20s, I was grappling with this issue of premature ejaculation, and I'd been struggling with it my entire life. Really, ever since my first sexual experiences, if I'm truly honest. I had a number of relationships that were severely affected by this issue. It was the major, thorn in my side, and it was having a huge impact on my self-esteem. Eventually, that pain became so great that I decided to make a very dedicated study and practice to overcome this issue. And since then, I've been really guiding many, many men to do the same. So today, I want to share with you guys my insights gathered over years and years and years working on this issue within my own life and in my relationship, as well as through the immense amounts of work that I've done with men from all over the world. Towards the end, I'll also give you guys a full step-by-step plan for overcoming your premature ejaculation and pointing you towards the exact resources and tools and practices that you need in order to make real progress with this issue. So strap yourself in. This episode is going to be juicy, full of profound insights, and as always, I'll be weaving my own story throughout it to give you guys reference points and examples and hopefully see how this applies to you and your situation. So I just want to start by saying that I really define premature ejaculation as the experience of any man who is ejaculating uncontrollably before he actually wants to. Bearing in mind that the average lasting time for men in the bedroom is roughly 5 minutes. So the bar is set pretty low. Personally, I experienced losing control within moments of penetration, sometimes even before penetration had occurred. At the worst stages for me, I could lose control without even being touched, even if I was just pleasuring my partner. So I had it bad. And that's really what I would define as extreme PE. And I've had a lot of men approach me and get support with this. Other guys who are experiencing it at a similar level of difficulty. Whereas others come to me and find themselves frustrated and limited by ejaculating just within the first 5 or 10 minutes and want to develop their capacities far beyond that. Another useful distinction is the difference between lifelong PE, as in it's been there for as long as you can remember, and intermittent PE, which comes and goes or simply developed at a certain stage in your life. And I've had quite a number of men who said their PE developed when COVID happened or after certain traumatic events or moments in their life. And there's a very good reason for this, as I'll be explaining in just a minute. So when it comes to the sources and causes of premature ejaculation in men, I want to set things up to help you to have a deep and comprehensive understanding of the big picture. Now, this is going to take a bit of time to actually set up, and I'm going to tell a bit of a story here. But this, hopefully, comprehensive view is really going to help you to move forward with much more clarity. So I hope it'll be very useful and insightful for you. So in order to understand this issue properly, we need to go back in time, way, way back to childhood and adolescence. I think I can speak on behalf of most men here in saying that I never received much of an education around sexuality in my culture here in Australia. I'm sure for plenty of other men in the West, it's been very similar. My parents certainly didn't know how to educate me around this topic. My schools made a token effort and taught us a little bit, mainly about STDs and STIs and how to put a condom on a banana, this kind of thing, a little bit about pregnancy or avoiding pregnancy. But there was very little guidance and actual mentorship that helped me to understand how to relate to my body, to my erotic energy, or to understand the massively complex dynamics that unfold in relationships with other people, with women, and their erotic energy. All of this was unfolding at a time where there was this huge upwelling of new, exciting arousal and sensations that I was going through and experiencing at the time of puberty. And of course, in the absence of a proper role model or education in this area, I turned towards the only place that I knew how or could find any information, which was my friends. And those guys were just as clueless as me. And I very soon developed the impression from my parents and from teachers and from adults in general that this was a bit of a taboo subject. It was a bit of a touchy thing. People were awkward about it. So I became awkward about it. It felt like something that was meant to be kept a little bit hush-hush. So naturally, I started to explore this awkward and taboo part of myself in private. I remember finding my father's porn collection and, of course, like so many boys, became obsessed with this kind of material, as really it was the only way that I could start to educate and understand and explore my sexual nature. But within that, there was always this looming fear of getting caught, busted by my parents or someone walking into my room as I was enjoying myself. So I learned to hide my sexuality and to sneak time in private where I could get off, essentially. And this pattern really helped to install in me this belief that my sexual side of myself was something shameful, something I had to keep secret, something that I couldn't let other people see or find out about me. This became a very deep and dysfunctional pattern that I have associated with my sexuality. which I am in fact still working on today. I'm still pulling apart, I'm still healing, I'm still understanding this, the effect of this, and the way this has impacted my life, my relationships, my approach towards lovemaking, and my relationship with myself. Really, this helped to cement within me this very deep dysfunctional connection that linked the experience of pleasure with fear. And this, of course, was carried with me from those early stages and was infused into all of my early sexual experiences, which were so often combined with a healthy dose of narcotics and alcohol as a form of social lubricant, which helped me to actually overcome in those early stages the massive anxiety that I was experiencing, to somehow break through and overcome the fear that I had, to loosen my inhibitions. And that was the recipe for my early sexual adventures, which in those days were, of course, pretty quick, pretty messy, and very often regretfully integrated with a smashing hangover. And yeah, awkward memories and a certain healthy dose of regret. Now, I was raised in a culture of brash boys, sexual conquest that was spurred on somehow. This was the culture within my friendship group. We were all pushing each other to be adventurous and daring, and we really had this aim to have these sexual conquests and to rack up numbers and to compete with each other to see who could score the most. And my education on how to conduct myself in those sexual adventures was largely informed by what I saw porn stars doing, which was a hot and sweaty pounding with a rush, this intense rush towards an explosive climax. In porn, I saw sex being reduced to this somewhat vulgar and very explicit transaction that was, for the most part, very thrilling, very intense, but largely emotionally disconnected. And so, like most of the boys and lads in our generation, I was just as sexually illiterate as I was emotionally illiterate and disconnected from myself. So naturally, my early experiences and relationships were fraught with situations and feelings that I had absolutely no idea how to navigate. When I entered my first relationship, I couldn't hide behind alcohol and weed all the time, and I soon discovered that I really struggled to control myself during sex. And what followed from that was essentially years of my trauma and these early dysfunctional patterns playing out and getting repeated, slowly reinforced and layered by more experiences. Some of those were pleasurable, deeply enjoyable, and amazing. And others were very frustrating and shame-inducing. And this is where this pattern really started to build. And this, of course, was continued for more than a decade before I finally got sick of this frustrating kind of like dance, this kind of push-pull, this intense fascination and desire to receive and experience pleasure and to share that with with a partner, which was somehow butting up against this physiological, mental, emotional limitation, because I couldn't control the experience in the way that I wanted to. I didn't feel free. And really, there was this huge disconnect happening at this time, because what I saw porn stars doing, smashing and pounding away for hours, having these intense, wild sexual experiences, compared to what I was capable of, a minute, if I was lucky, zero capacity to control. This actually, seeing this created this huge anxiety inside of me, because I was unconsciously at the time relating to my sexual experiences as if I had to perform like a porn star. It was as if I was looking for this sense of validation and approval from my partners in order to confirm my sense of self-worth. And I think so many men experience this. And that really created this huge pressure on my shoulders, this weight, this fear that I was not doing a good job. I was not performing well. I didn't know it back then, but I was desperately chasing external validation, which was a symptom of my childhood trauma and my attachment wounds and my nice guy coping mechanisms of people pleasing. And these patterns are all very interconnected and linked. And at that stage of my life, I was super disconnected from myself, my feelings, my nervous system. And I was really just acting impulsively and trying to survive in the social environment in the only way that I knew how. Following along and imitating my peers, and just kind of making do. Frustrating, and as I said before, this kind of like balancing, trying to balance these things in a certain way. The desire for validation and approval butting up against my limitations. Eventually, this reached a point, and I remember saying to myself, like, enough is enough. I need to fix this issue, because there has to be more than this. It felt like it was killing me. And that's when I really started to, at this stage of my life, I was really traveling a lot and exploring. And this is when I discovered sacred sexuality, tantra, and yoga. At this stage, I started to develop a more conscious relationship towards my sexuality. I started educating myself, discovering this, different approach of treating sex and relating to my own sexuality as something beautiful, as something sacred, as a spiritual practice. And this really opened my eyes and really changed the way I was relating to myself and to my partners. Over the following years, I ended up traveling to India 7 times, studying and practicing and gradually developing a much more embodied and mindful approach and relationship with myself. I started to connect the dots between my mind, my breath, my sexual energy. I started to notice how much tension and trauma was trapped within the tissues of my body. I started turning towards my emotional experiences instead of numbing them out with weed and alcohol. I really started to work through this immense amount of shame and anxiety and fear that I had attached and associated to my sexual nature. And I discovered that approaching lovemaking consciously with a partner could be one of the most wonderful and pleasurable experiences that life has to offer. I discovered that sex could be prolonged, not just for minutes, but in fact for hours on end. I started practicing semen retention for weeks and months at a time, and I learned to channel that energy towards my spiritual practices to become more conscious and aware of myself. And eventually I started to have major breakthroughs in lovemaking where I was really able to start enjoying and letting go and experiencing freedom to actually fill myself with pleasure without the fear of losing control. This was the moments when I really started to break through this issue of premature ejaculation, which was, of course, for me, absolutely mind-blowing. It opened so many new doors into the sexual experience as well as into relationships. It really enabled me to own my masculinity, develop a much deeper sense of confidence in myself, and that was the backbone of what then became this work. I started leading myself, and I started leading other men. That's when I really sort of started stepping into men's coaching and putting what I had learned into systems to help other guys make the same steps that I'd made. So that's the backstory about my journey so far. Perhaps you can see some of yourself in what I've shared. I think I don't think I'm unique in any way. I think my experiences, I've seen them echoed again and again and again by other men. So I think it's somehow, representative of a lot of men's experiences in this realm. And I hope this leaves you feeling somehow seen in your experience, because I know when I was going through it, it felt like I was the only one. I was alone, struggling with these problems that I had no idea how to solve. And that was probably the hardest part, was scratching my head, feeling like I have no idea what the fuck is going on. I know this is not it. This is not what I want. There has to be more, but I just didn't know where to look. I didn't know where to find the answers that I needed. Once I found the answers and I started developing practices and I started connecting the dots and understanding this issue, then things became easier because I felt like I had a path to walk on. There was like a direction. I had a direction. So now what I want to do is outline for you guys the main limitations and problems that guys who are experiencing PE are dealing with. And after that, I'm going to give you the solutions that I've found and developed and experienced to be the most impactful and beneficial. So hopefully I can transmit my direction and what has worked for me and give that to you guys. Because I know that's what I needed the most when I was struggling. So first up, it's really important to understand that ejaculation is a function of the sympathetic nervous system. If you think about it, it feels like there is this big build-up of tension as you receive pleasure and you feel arousal, and that builds up and builds up and builds up, and then that is followed by this big release, the orgasm and the ejaculation. Your nervous system is charging up like a battery, which gets overloaded and then discharges all that energy because it reaches its capacity and then it disperses. And this is where the problem really starts for most of us men, because so many of us are living completely out of touch with our nervous system, and we experience varying degrees of an almost constant state of dysregulation. Which means that we are basically out of balance. We're usually somewhat stuck in a fight-flight response. Just like the guys who are experiencing erectile dysfunction, I did an episode about that last week. If that's your issue and you want to learn more about that, go check that out. And these are really like two sides of the same coin, ED and PE. They're so often experienced together. Some guys have more one or more the other, but they're very connected. Because we're disconnected from the state of our nervous system, most of us haven't really developed our emotional capacities or strategies for soothing ourselves and bringing regulation, calming ourselves down. We exist in a culture that lives online, disconnected from nature. Nature has a very naturally regulating function. If you go out bushwalking, you'll notice, it's like you take a breath, your body relaxes, your nervous system starts to soothe itself just being in nature, because nature isn't stressed. We exist in community of people running around in survival, very busy, and survival is motivated by fear, the fear of death. If we don't do the work necessary to survive, we die. So that fear is constantly working on us, constantly like in the background, like pushing us forward, pushing us to work, pushing us to go and find sex, pushing us to, have all of this intense activity day to day, essentially. And our society really rewards us for solving problems, bringing value to other people, so much of which is kind of mind activity. We solve problems with our mind, we work with our mind, we engage others with our mind. It's very mental. And because of this, we've become very disembodied, very disconnected from ourselves, from our feelings, from our nervous system. We keep ourselves running constantly on this hamster wheel of life, because the moment that we slow down, we actually start to feel that intense buildup of nervous energy bubbling away under the surface and overwhelming our nervous system. And the moment we slow down, you feel all of that. You feel that intense dysregulation, and it's pretty unbearable. Nobody likes to sit with anxiety. Nobody likes to feel that fear. Nobody wants to face their trauma and their shame. And so it's much easier to just keep ourselves busy. As long as we keep running, we don't have to slow down. We don't have to feel everything. If we distract ourselves from the feeling, we can temporarily, keep ourselves ahead of the ball somehow, and we don't have to feel all of it. Now, because of this, we are essentially out of balance, and we have a largely unconscious relationship to our nervous system. Of course, this is starting to change. We see much more content, much more awareness, many more people sort of teaching and promoting this, but we're still very disconnected. And if we are disconnected from our nervous system, we are also disconnected from our capacity to feel and regulate our sexual experiences, because the sexual function is intimately connected, entwined. It's part of your nervous system. And if we think about sex is a very intense sensory experience that involves your whole body, your mind, your physicality, the actual nerves and senses that you are engaging with someone else's nervous system. Usually someone that we find attractive. Your lingam, the male genitalia, lingam is the Sanskrit word, lingam and yoni. We use this, it's just much more poetic than the word penis and vagina, which is very clinical. So I like to use lingam and yoni. It's one of the most sensitive parts of your body, with literally thousands and thousands of nerve endings in that fleshy area. which when it's exposed during pleasure, it's super intense, especially when you've got a sexy woman or a man, if that's your thing, putting their wet mouth or their yoni onto your lingam, sliding up and down those nerves. It's pretty fucking intense, right? It's no wonder that it's hard to control. Layered on top of your nervous system, which is mostly dysregulated, is all of these mental associations that we have with sex. The minds of multiple generations of young boys have been overly influenced and distorted by pornography, which really creates very unrealistic expectations towards sex. It creates a lot of fantasies, kinks, turn-ons, which are for the most part repressed because we feel a lot of shame because we've attached those with the need to keep it hidden, private, secret. We have an overly sort of stimulated and hyper fixation on sexuality, this very vulgar sexuality, which is depicted in pornography, this sort of like hard, fast smash. Which is very difficult to control. If you've ever, if you're a guy with PE, it's hard to have just a teacup, let alone a full bucket of that energy. And it's very easy to forget that porn is a construction. It's filmed. It's a movie set. It gets filmed over days or weeks. If you've ever been on a movie set or a film set, it happens, scene by scene, shot by shot. It's slow. There's like 30 people there. Which means that it's a construction. What you see is a fabrication. It's fake. It's unrealistic. And yet our minds struggle to tell the difference. Just like when you're in a movie, you know that it's a film, but it draws you in, it sucks you in, it's well crafted, it's a very convincing illusion. But our minds really struggle to tell the difference, and we get deeply programmed by it. Such to the point that our mind's capacity to fantasize and conjure up sexual imagery becomes very well developed. However many hours of porn that you've watched, that is literally like blasted sexual programming and expectations and different flavors and textures of that sexuality and the message within it into your subconscious mind, filling you with all kinds of biases and expectations around sex. As a simple example of this, I've noticed within myself is just thinking about ejaculating brings me to the point of ejaculation. Porn really emphasizes the money shot, right? The part where the guy comes on on the feminine porn star. And I've noticed during lovemaking, these thoughts bubble up from I don't know where, somewhere in my subconscious mind, pop into my head, and suddenly I'm thinking about coming, which makes it really hard to control because those fantasies, those thoughts, and the images associated with them are preloaded and trigger this associated response in my nervous system. Pretty interesting, right? Maybe you've noticed this. On top of this is the dysfunctional sexual patterns that I developed by watching porn, browsing for hours, searching for the perfect video, hunched over my computer in the middle of the night, in the dark, no awareness over my body, no connection to my breath. My pleasure at the end is this short sprint to the finish, I noticed just watching YouTube for a few hours, my nervous system starts to get like on edge, kind of tensed up. I feel anxiety. Sometimes I feel anxiety in my chest, in my body. If I watch too much before I go to sleep, it's hard to go to sleep. And that's just with normal YouTube. I haven't watched porn in years, but imagine how much more intense it is to watch porn. That shit is like blasting into your subconscious and filling you with all of this thoughts, programmings, sexual fantasies, and desires. So there's really no awareness in that process. There's no mindfulness. There's no regulation. There's no deeper connection other than my mind's association with the images and the pixels on the screen. So it's no wonder when I jump into bed with a real woman, I was disconnected and I was easily overwhelmed because I'd been training myself to be disconnected and overwhelmed for years and years and years and years. Now, the next important aspect I want to cover is the pelvic floor. Most of us have little to zero connection with this part of our body. The pelvic floor is this diaphragm at the bottom of your trunk between your pelvic bone and your coccyx, the base of your spine. It's basically all of that soft, fleshy tissue in between your legs, the taint, as it's known in the States. And that acts as like a bowl at the bottom, which keeps your organs all packed in and together. It also plays a role in sexual functioning. And it's also responsible for a lot of our dysfunction that occurs. It's this very complex point of intersection between lots of different bones, ligaments, and muscles. And that area becomes very tight, very blocked. And this is what is known as hypertension of the pelvic floor, an excessive amount of tension in that region. When the pelvic floor is tight, your ability to handle stimulation and pleasure is massively reduced. Now, so many of us spend several hours a day sitting on the pelvic floor, squashing it down, compressing it, and it becomes very rigid, very tight. We spend most of our lives running around in survival mode, as I've expressed, going from one thing to the next, and we're rarely, if ever, doing the necessary work to actually unwind all of that tension and fear and anxiety that we accumulate. When I started to practice yoga, I started to connect this dot between the pelvic floor and the root chakra. Now, the root chakra is associated with safety, security, survival, financial stability. And most of us have lived a life, at least especially for the early parts of our life, very financially unstable. We were just learning, we were just figuring out survival. We were just basically looking to create security for ourselves. Okay, initially we got that given by our family. Many of us didn't receive a lot of security from our family, or certain forms of security, but not others. Maybe they took care of us financially and we had certain needs met, but emotionally they were not met. So disharmony and dysregulation, a lack of understanding or a lack of sort of integration of that root chakra and the qualities that it is associated with, basically results in a lot of contraction and tension. We have a lot of fear, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of insecurity. And when you get afraid, that goes down into the pelvic floor. That's one of the points that attracts and somehow contains a lot of that energy. Just look what happens when you get scared by something. You tense up, you tighten up, your butthole like literally contracts. The pelvic floor muscles tense and tighten, ready to launch you in a certain direction, to run away, to fight. So when you're in fight flight, the pelvic floor is switched on. It's contracting. It's tense. So for most of us, we have very weak and also very tight pelvic floors. We've also forgotten how to breathe properly. When you're tensed, when you're anxious, when you're stressed, you breathe very shallow up here. You actually lose the capacity to engage the diaphragm. We stop breathing low into the belly, and as a result of that, we stop pushing pressure down into the pelvic floor and actually achieving a deeper relaxation. We've also developed poor movement patterns and postural patterns. Because we live such sedentary lives, we spend so much time sitting, we don't have to go out, we don't have to hunt, we don't have to journey out into nature very often. We're pretty lazy for the most part. All of which makes the pelvic floor muscles very immobile and very twitchy. You might have noticed these involuntary twitches, and as you start to practice contracting and developing a deeper relationship with the pelvic floor, you'll notice these muscles are very tense and twitchy. And that triggers the point of no return. That triggers you to go over the top, over the edge, and lose control. When the pelvic floor is hypertense, the stimulation of the nerves that you get when you experience pleasure is way too much for you to handle. And you'll find it very difficult, if not impossible, to actually relax because you have decades and decades of tension patterns and fear and anxiety stuck in that area. And as a result of that, you'll find it very hard to control the sexual energy because a vessel that is tight is like a pressure cooker. It's like locking that pleasure and that intense sort of energy, that sexual energy, it locks it in so it has nowhere to go. And when the capacity of that vessel builds up, too much pressure, you ejaculate because that's the release valve that lets some of that pressure escape. So you can think about it like this. There's years and decades of pressure locking that area up, making it very rigid, very twitchy, very immobile. And so, of course, the pleasure energy has nowhere to go, no room to expand. And I'll be giving you the steps to alleviate this and work through this very shortly. But that sort of analogy, that visual example really helped me to understand like what is happening here. When I feel pleasure, when my lingam is stimulated, it's like, whoa, it had nowhere to go. I just felt like I couldn't contain that energy and I had no strategies for actually moving that energy. Because I was also suppressing my voice. I was suppressing my breath. I didn't know how to express the pleasure. I was tense and tight and I had no way to move that energy. I was rigid, stuck, frozen. Essentially. And as you progress, you'll notice that. Now, on top of this highly pressurized environment in the pelvic floor and our dysfunctional relationships to sexuality that we've received from pornography, you've got this immense pressure, this social pressure to perform, this deeply programmed need and desire to prove yourselves in the eyes of another, which really stems from this core wound that we as men have, which is feeling like we are not enough and that our worth, our value needs to be somehow earned by doing, by performing. In order to be enough, you need to be a man, right? So your sexual performance is entwined and interwoven with your manhood and your self-image. A real man can fuck like a porn star, right? That's what you've learned. So if you can't do that, you mustn't be a real man. This expectation further stresses you out because your social survival is essentially on the line. If you don't do it well, if you don't fuck well, this girl or this guy might judge you. They might tell their friends about you behind your back, or they might leave you for someone else, someone who can satisfy them better or is more of a man than you. Pretty brutal, right? So we can see within this issue of premature ejaculation a whole array of influences that basically set us up to fail. We've got a dysregulated nervous system, we have a disconnected relationship with the pelvic floor, and we're dealing with an intense amount of performance anxiety and fear around intimacy. It's no wonder that this issue is so common, that it's in fact an epidemic. And when you look at the numbers, it's pretty crazy. It's something like 1 in 3 men struggle with premature ejaculation. Crazy. Well, now you see why. Because these issues, the symptoms that create premature ejaculation are essentially systemic. Who isn't stressed about survival? Who hasn't exposed themselves to, hours and hours, hundreds of hours of pornography? Who does have a regulated nervous system, a deep connection to their breath, and an understanding of the pelvic floor? Not many people. So hopefully that helps you to see and connect some of the dots here. This took me a long time to sort of put all of this together and really see how everything was connected. So I hope in this transmission that this is like light bulb after light bulb of being like, wow, okay, I didn't realize, wow, that makes so much sense. Hopefully you're getting that. So this is a complex issue. It has a lot of threads that we need to pull together. I know it's just hearing that is somehow overwhelming, perhaps for you, but the good news is that there are very concrete strategies and steps that we can make real progress like today. I've coached guys, and the methods that I promote, I've seen guys break through in just a matter of weeks, sometimes even seeing results after just a single session. Other guys take months, depending on your level of commitment. So now what I want to do is share the exact steps and strategies that I've developed over the years to combat premature ejaculation, to heal and fix this issue. Step 1, nervous system regulation. You need to develop a set of practices and resources that will help you calm, soothe, and deepen your connection to your nervous system. This includes developing healthy habits of relaxation, learning to turn towards what you feel instead of running away from it. We need to practice making this transition from the sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress response, fight, flight, and switching ourselves into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, heal, sleep. That takes time to develop that. There's no quick fix. None of the solutions that I'm giving you are like a magic pill, which is essentially what the mainstream medical perspective is promoting. Take these pills, use this numbing spray, do a few Kegels, do the stop-start method, take it slow, and that will, solve the issue. It's way more complicated than that. So we really need to learn how to make this transition and develop this capacity to bring out, first of all, to notice the fact that you're stressed at all is a huge step. Just to be aware of your anxiety and learning to notice the activities that actually put you into a stressed state. You watch too much YouTube, you're watching porn, you're actually afraid of intimacy. I still have moments where my nervous system, I work online, I'm making content, I'm working. And sometimes if I'm in that mode and I've been running all day long, and I go to jump into bed with my woman, I'm stressed. And just the fear that, like, there's still this pattern of fear within me of like, I'm going to come too soon. It's going to be embarrassing. I don't want to feel that shame. I'd rather not. I still notice that. So we need to learn to develop the capacity to identify what the fuck we're feeling, which most of us men are pretty shit at that. We pretty struggle to identify and label the emotion that we're feeling, or to even just put the finger on our anxiety and be like, I'm stressed, I'm anxious right now, and I need to prioritize some self-care to soothe myself, to regulate my nervous system and calm the fuck down. Even this is like something that takes time, and that's a sort of developmental step we need to make. Life is so much better when you're actually connected to your real capacity. It's humbling, because we're sort of educated and conditioned by society that we should be able to have it all. We should be able to have kids, have a full career, have our hobbies on the side. We're able to do everything and more, and look after our relationship and have sex. But it's very humbling when you get in touch with the realistic capacity of your nervous system. And sometimes I notice that, I go to make a bit of content. I, do a session with a client and, make myself breakfast. I'll sit down to work and I'll be like, no, I can't. If I keep going now, I'm just going to get myself into a mess. And so I've had to learn to actually pull myself back and say no to a lot of things, because doing so just tips me over. And I want to maintain regulation, and regulation has become more important than just ticking things off my list. So that's a transition that we need to learn how to make. We need to learn how to manage our stress levels. And obviously that carries into the quality of connection and your experience of intimacy. We need to develop a much deeper relationship with our breath, learning to actually breathe deeper, engaging the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. All of these things are connected, and the nervous system is like the fabric on which everything else is playing out. If you have zero connection to your nervous system, you're not going to be connected to your arousal. You're not going to be able to soothe yourself, relax yourself, calm yourself down, and you'll never be able to control. Maybe you've experienced at some points when you drink a lot of alcohol and you go in to make love, you can last for ages because you are literally numbing your nervous system. You've literally put like a depressant on top, and that explains why. Suddenly the pleasure isn't so heightened, your senses are all dulled, and you can pound away a bit. We don't want to rely on those dysfunctional strategies. We want to develop the real connected strategy of actually understanding where you are, what you can handle, and how to find a way to move forward and a way to start deepening your relationship with pleasure. As you become more and more in touch with your nervous system, you'll have better and better strategies for soothing and regulating your experience, validating your emotions, allowing that stuff to bubble up. And that's healing. That's very, very healing. But it takes time. Totally worth doing, by the way, even without the sexual side. Just learning to regulate yourself and have a much more calm and relaxed nervous system is, a huge game changer in your ways of relating with people, your experience of life, the productivity of your mind. Because when you're stressed, everything contracts. It's not just the pelvic floor, your mind, your attentional system. This guy, which is constantly looking around, like stressed, looking afraid, this starts to relax and open. And that's the background of any kind of spiritual practice, any state of deeper meditation, any kind of expansion of your consciousness needs a certain amount of regulation and relaxation, because that's safety inducing, which is the foundation that we need for any kind of development. If we're constantly running around like this stressed, anxious chicken or monkey, we can tick things off the list, but that kind of runs out at a certain point. So we need to learn to regulate. Step number 2 is detaching from pornography. In my view, pornography does way more harm than good. So at least for like an intermediate period of time, we want to unplug completely. We want to try to understand the ways that porn has influenced our connection to sex and pleasure. And if need be, we need to heal and develop a much more pure and embodied relationship to our sexual energy. We've got to let go of those unrealistic, hypersexualized fantasies in your head and become more connected to your body, your senses, your arousal scale, noticing as you build up from like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 is ejaculation. So we need to learn how to keep ourselves in a healthy range. Porn makes it super difficult. We go from a 1 to a 10 in a few minutes, or from a 6 into a 11. It's hard to control because it's just way too intense. It's all up here. It's disconnected. So we need to learn to reconnect, and just unplugging from porn is the best way. I'm not saying you need to quit porn forever. It's possible to develop a healthy relationship with porn. But for most men who have just been bombarded by this stimulus and programmed by it for years or decades, we need to cut that shit out, clear the decks, and start from a clean slate. Step number 3 is developing a conscious self-pleasure practice. This is one of the best ways to retrain your relationship to sex and pleasure. Actually approaching self-pleasure in a way that is somehow removing this intense fantasy and mental imagery and hypersexual sort of fantasies out of the picture, and strip everything back and approach self-pleasure as if it was you making love to your own body, as if it was like a yoga class, which means it's very mindful. We're very connected to the breath. We are moving the sexual energy with the breath and by making sounds. Making sound. It's super powerful to be able to move, because the voice, the vagus nerve, the tone of your voice, all of this is actually like a soothing, regulating function. And if you can combine the experience of pleasure with a breathe, first of all, the breath is going to move the energy up and down. It's going to let energy out. The sound is connected to the breath as well. So there's the sexual energy is like the pressure cooker that's building. And we want to learn mechanisms for actually allowing the pressure to come out. We need to hit the valve before the sort of major valve of ejaculation is triggered. So the breath, sound, letting that out and letting the pleasure manifest in the form of breath and sound is a really regulating way to move it. You also want to learn to move your body. As I was starting to do this, I started to I wasn't just fixating on my lingam and just the pleasure there. I tried to develop this capacity to make my whole body like part of the experience. I was touching, massaging, caressing, even just touching your body is helping your mind to take the attention away from the super intense experience in the nerves of your lingam. And it's like, it's helping you to feel in other parts of your body. You want to create sensation so you can touch, you can caress, squeeze different parts of your body. You can move different parts of your body. You're going to be breathing, making sound, and turning the sexual experience into a full body experience. Not just this raw sensation on your cock. Your whole body is a lingam. So you need to learn to move that energy, to move in rhythm with the energy, and to let pressure like move through your system and emerge in other ways. And this is really going to help you to learn to develop more and more and more capacity. Instead of that sexual energy building up really quickly, becoming unmanageable and dominating you, you're going to learn to control it. We need to learn, we also, self-pleasure is also going to be the time that you get to practice integrating these skills of nervous system regulation. You're going to develop much more familiarity and control, like a very fine degree of control with your arousal scale. We're going to use the breath. We're going to use relaxation and the mind to really move ourselves up and down the arousal scale. So getting really good at coming up, getting close to the point of no return, and then coming back down and regulating ourselves. And it's really powerful to experience self-pleasure without ejaculating. Most of us have trained ourselves to come every single time we get hard. Porn makes it really hard not to come because it's super intense. So we want to actually have, self-pleasure, regular self-pleasure. So we're exposing ourselves to get used to the sensation, to elongating the experience. Instead of a quick rush to the end in the first 5 minutes, you're going to self-pleasure yourself on a daily basis for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, up to an hour. I remember when I was starting, I was recognizing that the nerves and my nervous system was so, I was having sex every now and then, once in a blue moon, whenever I got lucky or whatever. I needed daily stimulation. I needed regular exposure to subject the nerve endings and my nervous system to basically soak myself in pleasure, to learn to accept pleasure, because there was so much fear attached to the experience of pleasure that that I was like rejecting it. My system would reject it. Like the fact that you come in 2 minutes shows that your body just doesn't have the capacity to hold it. So we need to develop a practice, a consistent daily practice of pleasuring ourselves and learning to regulate our sexual experience and keep our arousal under the point of no return. We need that, we need that consistently over a fairly decent period of time. I'm talking months and months and months of daily exposure in combination with these other techniques that I'm going to be giving you, just to get used to it, Just like anything you want to get good at. If you want to learn a language, if you want to learn Qigong or yoga or, a martial art, the only way you're getting good is if you practice on a daily basis. If you want to become an elite level athlete at anything, it's daily dedication for hours. So if the sexual practice that you've been getting is, 5 minutes of ejaculating to porn for most of your life, of course you're not a rock star. Of course you're not a peak level athlete. Of course you can't handle yourself well. You don't have skills. If you want to become legendary in the bedroom, you need a legendary amount of exposure and practice, like daily discipline. As I've said, there's a lot of components here. It's complex. There's all of this inner stuff that we have to work through, and we're not going to make really much progress at all unless we expose ourselves. You can buy something like a fleshlight, something that helps you to increase the stimulation and make it really kind of more realistic. So it's like training yourself, building up. And I recommend starting with zero imagination, just stripping it back to the sensations of you, your breath, your cock, the pleasure, and go really slow. Really, really slow. It's going to be like a meditative, building yourself up, calming yourself down, building yourself up, calming yourself down, and learning to relax and slowly open up to the experience of pleasure. And that self-pleasure practice is the prep. This is your training ground that's setting you up for the battle to come, which is lovemaking. Which the difficulty of lovemaking is way, way, way more. You've got this really sexy woman or whoever it is pressing themselves up against you. You've got all of that expectation, the social, aspect to it as well. And it's way more intense. So we need to prepare for that. You don't just charge into battle and you haven't even swung a sword, or you've swung a sword for 5 minutes a day. If you want to go right into battle, you want to be drilling daily for hours, This is the way I want you guys to think of it. And this work is pleasurable work. It's not unpleasant. You will have to work through many layers and a lot of stuff, but ultimately it's very pleasant work. And when I first started understanding this and putting this into practice, I was spending 30 to 60 minutes a day, just really getting an intimate connection with my arousal and exposing myself to pleasure. And this helped me immensely. So when I did go into lovemaking, I had drilled my relaxation patterns. I drilled my breathing. I drilled my arousal scale. I knew how to move myself up and down. I knew how to relax my pelvic floor and keep it loose instead of letting it become very twitchy and tight. So this is super, super important. Some form of daily practice and learning to edge yourself, to keep yourself very close to the point of no return. This is going to set you up. It's really going to set you up. And trust me, that what you develop in that, it's going to carry over into lovemaking. Those skills transfer directly over. And that will actually prepare you for some amazing peak experiences in lovemaking. I was developing orgasms without ejaculation during self-pleasure. I had spiritual experiences that I was having during self-pleasure. It became a really intense kind of practice for me. And it needs to become that for you guys too. It's worth it. It's highly worth it. And yeah, you will develop a much deeper relationship with yourself in the process. And that is always something valuable. The next important step 4 is pelvic floor rehab. So this step is crucial for guys who have decades of tension, anxiety, and sexual shame stuck in the pelvic region. We need to start breaking all of that fascia apart, all of the trapped and stored tension, the emotions, the trauma that's stuck in the tissues of your body. We need to break all of that apart and bring relaxation. This is why yoga was so good for me, because I was spending hours a day just stretching, moving, breathing. I needed more than just yoga. I needed to focus directly on the pelvic floor, which is something that I studied. We need to learn to balance the muscles of the pelvic floor by strengthening and lengthening them. It's not enough just to do Kegels and make a really strong pelvic floor muscles. We also need to learn to do the reverse Kegel and open up the pelvic floor. This is one of the main sort of gripes that I have with mainstream medical approaches. Like, just do Kegels. Do Kegels. Even the yoga school that I was a part of was like, do Mula Bandha all day long, thousands and thousands of reps of Mula Bandha, or the Kegel contraction. The Kegel is the muscles between your balls and your anus, and you can basically stop the flow of urine. It's a pulling sort of from the back of the balls towards the anus. You can pull those muscles. That's a Kegel. That is great because we want a strong pelvic floor, and for some guys that can work, but for a lot of guys their pelvic floor is tense and tight, and a Kegel is just adding more tension and strength to muscles which are already overly tight. So we also need to learn to relax and open up and create space. So for that, we need to learn how to do reverse Kegels. We need to learn to push down, to open, to expand the pelvic floor. This bowl, this basin needs to basically open because it's already super tight, super crunched up. If we just tense and tighten the pelvic floor, it's crunching things more. It's not opening and expanding. In order to get rid of these involuntary contractions that we have, these spasms, we need to open the space. And for that, we need to breathe into the belly, expanding the diaphragm. We need to relax and open those muscles. We need to consciously let go of the tension and practice reverse Kegeling. I was doing reverse Kegels all day, every day. That was like when I understood that, because I was already practicing Kegels like a maniac, but that was actually just making me even more tight. Once I understood about reverse Kegels, I was doing that shit daily. I was having dedicated daily practice, 10, 20 minutes a day, just focusing on learning how to do reverse Kegels. And once I got in that habit, it just became a reflex. Like I was literally walking around reverse Kegeling all day long, such to the point that my pelvic floor became so loose, so relaxed. I was also doing exercises to correct my anterior pelvic tilt. So when the pelvis is tilted towards the anterior, we have this tipping motion, this duck bum. The pelvis tilt rotates forward because we have really tight duck hip flexors. We have a tight lower back. We need to learn to basically reverse that process and bring our pelvis into proper alignment. When the pelvis is in proper alignment, reverse Kegels are much more easy to, integrate and practice. If the pelvis is out of alignment and we have this tipped position of the pelvis, we can do reverse Kegels, but they struggle to open things up. They won't be as effective. So we need to learn to bring our hips into the proper alignment. And for that, we need to, focus on a whole protocol of exercises, which will help to fix that. You can find tutorials on YouTube for this. It's also something I take care of in my online course. We focus a lot on this. And basically, we want to be like a gymnast down there. Strong, very strong, but also flexible and relaxed. That's kind of the key. And yeah, bringing the sort of balancing the pelvic floor and focusing on pelvic floor rehab will really allow you to keep things loose and relaxed. And especially when you get really good at reverse Kegels, these become the main sort of control mechanism in combination with your breath and making sound to regulate your arousal levels, to move yourselves up and down and to keep yourself away from the point of no return. If I get really close to the point of no return, I take a breath, engage my diaphragm and do a reverse Kegel. And that pushes me down, that pushes the pleasure away. It stops things being overwhelming. And when I really drilled that mechanism on a daily basis, it became like a knife, like I could cut the pleasure. It would start building, and then I could push down, relax, breathe, and I would find myself back, instead of at a 10, I was back down to a 7 or a 6. So this is crucial. If you're not practicing reverse Kegels daily, you're going to struggle to make a lot of progress. So I can't emphasize that enough, is you need to become a master, like a wizard with the reverse Kegel. We also want to integrate a certain amount of Kegels to balance and strengthen, to make sure we have, a strong pelvic floor. But for most guys, especially for the guys that have extreme premature ejaculation, we need to bring like a lot of relaxation, a lot of reverse Kegling. I would say focus 90% on reverse Kegels for the first few months. And integrate reverse Kegels into your self-pleasure practice. Practice them outside of that, practice them throughout the day, but as you go into self-pleasure, you're going to practice using the reverse Kegel to lower your arousal. If you want to speed up your arousal and get closer to the point of no return, you can do a Kegel. You contract the pelvic floor, things will get tighter, those spasms will be more intense, and you will tip yourself towards orgasm much quicker. The more tense you are, the more you're going to overload the system. The more relaxed you are, the less room, the less you're going to overload the system, the more space you're going to have to contain that energy. You also just need to stretch everything. Like all of the muscles that connect into the pelvic floor, they need to be limbered up. I'm stretching my abdominal, I stretch my lower back, I stretch all of the leg muscles. I have a yoga flow that I promote and give to the guys that are interested in doing this work, which basically takes them through like a full body relaxation and stretching. So we can just bring a measure of like calming the whole system down, creating more relaxation in your whole body. Because all of the muscles, they all tie in, they all connect, everything's connected. And obviously they all tie into the pelvic floor. So we want to make sure we're not just practicing reverse Kegels and opening the pelvic floor. We need to stretch everything to teach your whole body to relax. And that's what my yoga practice really gave me, was a full body relaxation, teaching myself to calm down, to relax, and then I took that attitude. I would take that, I would relax first, then I would go into self-pleasure. And everything was much more loose. Everything was much more open. Everything was much more relaxed. There's actually specific stretches and poses and postures we can do to actually alleviate the tension in the pelvic floor. I love to spend a lot of time in the deep squat, in the Hindi squat, just resting in the bottom position. That opens the pelvic floor. We can do a lot of cat-cow stretching to sort of mobilize and get used to like stretching that region. I love the cobra pose for, liberating the tension in my abdominals. I like to stretch my glutes, my quads. Everything gets stretched. I have a tennis ball that lives here on my desk because I sit on the tennis ball, because this is a really great tool for getting into the tension of the pelvic floor. I put this on the pelvic floor. It helps to give me some proprioceptive sort of feedback. I can feel the muscles easier. And I use this to break up the tension, break up the tissue and the fascia, and actually relax those muscles. It's very useful. Little tips and tricks like this help quite a lot. Step number 5 is creating a safe sexual container. This is super crucial for us guys who have had awkward or traumatic experiences, sexual situations in the past that influenced us in a negative way. Because your body remembers. And if you feel that pressure to perform and that's stuck inside of you, that's going to make it really, really difficult. So we need to learn how to set up intimacy with our partner in a way that actually makes us feel safe, so we can start to heal those wounds. I know this is not the most masculine attitude, men don't typically need, like to acknowledge that we also need safety as well. We are also wounded. We have healing work to be done. If you are suffering from premature ejaculation, you are traumatized, my friend. You have a dysfunctional, unhealthy, wounded relationship to pleasure and sexuality. And that needs to be healed. That's going to take time to heal. So we need, and healing cannot occur when you don't feel safe. So it's time to be humble, and it's time to acknowledge and recognize that we actually need to create the right conditions for us to heal. And we can't fake it. You can't fake it until you make it with this. This is something you have to sort of progress through and work through sequentially, systematically, in order to get to a healthy place. And then you can be the leader in the bedroom. Then you can show up and, rock your partner's world. But first, in order to get to that stage, we need to acknowledge that we have certain requirements, and safety is one of those. So I've had a lot of men come to me and say, I need to fix my premature ejaculation or my girlfriend's going to break up with me. I'm like, that's not good. That is not a good starting place. Because there's already so much pressure on top of your shoulders. Like, you feel like you're going to lose this person if you can't perform well. So it's no wonder you're tense. It's no wonder that you're anxious as fuck. You actually need to have a healing, healthy, conscious relationship where you have a willing and empathetic and understanding partner who's going to help you to relax your nervous system, who's going to soothe you, that's going to be patient and loving and supportive. So you can actually heal. And on the other side of that, then, you can have the amazing, crazy monkey sex that you want to have, that she wants to have. But before that, we need safe experiences. Sometimes we need many, maybe dozens or hundreds of safe experiences where you got to experience pleasure without the fear. Where you got to experience coming without feeling intense anxiety and shame. And I've had a client who worked with me recently sort of admit and share a win in the group that he had an amazing, emotionally clearing conversation with his partner where they just put all the cards on the table and he basically just got to express everything that was inside of him, his fears, his shame, the things that were blocking him, what he needed. And this was the thing that helped him break through. He was doing all of the right practices and everything I recommend, but it didn't really all shift until he had this clearing conversation with his partner, and that brought so much relief to him. The weight was stripped off his shoulders because he knew that he had room to play with this and move with this, and that she was on his side. And that finally created the conditions for him to relax into. So really, I can't stress how important it is to have your partner on your side. Because an unsupportive, uncaring, impatient partner is the last thing you need. You're literally better off alone. And at the same time, we can understand that it's frustrating for a partner that we have or for a woman that we're with for us to be so contracted, so blocked, so incapable of making love freely. So we don't just want to be advocating for our needs. We need to be deeply appreciative and understanding of, their position and what their experience is and their pain. Because it's not just us. It's our issue, but they're also in it. So we want to create that kind of open, supportive, loving containership for the situation, which is ultimately in service of the relationship. And that's a really great way to sort of tie it back. Is like, yes, this is my issue, my love. I need your support with this. I'm going through this process. I've found out some solutions and a path, and I know what I need to fix, but it's going to take some time. And it would really, really help me if we could just approach things slowly. Perhaps we could try making love more often so I get more exposure, and we slowly build things up. And in the beginning, you're going to need to approach lovemaking like really slowly. Like, it's already a step just to get her to pleasure you and massage you and maybe go down on you, but very slowly. So you have time to practice reverse Kegeling. You have time to practice your breathing. You can put your hips in the right to fix the anterior pelvic tilt. You need to open up. You need to feel the anxiety. You need to breathe and relax and let yourself, expand into the experience of pleasure. And that will be a very healing experience. And it can still be super deep, super connected, super fulfilling for both of you. But it's important that we take that time and we approach it from the right way and build up. Because if you dive straight into penetration, of course you're going to lose control real quick. And then that re-traumatizes you in a certain way, because it's disappointing. You come again, she's frustrated, and then you're like, my shame. And you go into this downward spiral. That's not helpful. We need to create an upward spiral where, yes, you have this limitation, but we found a way to make it fulfilling. We created safety for both of us. The experience was very connected. It was fulfilling. We both got to experience a deep or perhaps a new level of pleasure. And so it was a beneficial, positive experience. And that helps your nervous system to be like, whew, that was actually good. I made some progress. I understood something. I progressed a little bit. She really enjoyed it. The relationship was strengthened through the whole process. And that's how you sell it, it's for the relationship. My love, we're going to do this thing. This is what I need. Here's the direction. So even though you're in a sort of more receptive position because you struggle to control, you can still bring the direction, which is a masculine attitude. Here's what I need. This is what's going on. This is what the process looks like. Let's do this together. This is going to be great for our relationship. I think it could really transform things in a sort of medium amount of time. Give me a few months, and I think, sex is going to open up. We're going to have way more freedom. It's going to be way more enjoyable for you. I'm going to get to heal this issue, and that's going to be amazing for us. And that's the truth. That's how it is going to be if you can put all these together in the right way. So, I know that sounds like a lot. It's complex. There's a lot of moving parts and components. And it's true. But that's the big picture. And I wanted to expose you guys to that. I wanted to give you that perspective. I wanted to lay it all on the table. Yes, it's a lot to integrate. Yes, it's a complex issue. Yes, it's going to take serious time and serious work to really progress with this, especially for the guys that have extreme premature ejaculation. It's going to take some serious dedication, but that daily practice, that consistent effort is 100% worth it. I guarantee you, when you have that first moment of breakthrough, you're going to be like, holy fuck, this works. It's possible. I can do this. You're going to experience new levels of pleasure. New doors are going to open up in the sexual experience that you have with you and your partner. And this work really sets you up to liberate yourself from this curse and open new doors into intimacy and lovemaking and relationships. It's fucking amazing. I remember the first time when I broke through and I experienced lovemaking without feeling like I was going to come in 2 minutes. And that was just truly amazing. Truly amazing. It was like liberating. It was one of those moments in my life where I was like, it was actually one of the biggest moments in my life when I broke through what was one of my most serious sort of dysfunctions and limitations. That was one of the first experiences that I had of like a major shift, a major transformation, which skyrocketed my self-esteem, my confidence in myself, feeling like I could take the lead, feeling like I could take the initiative and bring new direction to my relationship. It was amazing. And that created a sort of a knock-on effect of many other significant moments of transformation in my life. So I know, very complex, a lot of things here. I could do many episodes breaking down each and every component of what I've sort of elucidated here. And if you guys need that, just let me know. I'll make whatever you guys need in order to feel like you're set up to succeed. And your feedback, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about this episode. I hope you found it sort of illuminating. And I've had some really beautiful feedback so far, and that, it touches me. It really lands, and it, it's food for my soul. So, because I pour everything into this, I spend hours and hours, and I delayed this episode it was due on Friday. Here it is, 3 days later, 2-3 days later, because I wanted to perfect it. I had a lot to say on this topic, so I wanted to transmit my deepest stuff for you guys. So, when you express your gratitude, when you leave a comment or a rating on the podcast or subscribe to my YouTube channel, it really means a lot. So thank you so much. And if you're a man that wants support with this, if you're struggling, if you're drowning with this issue, you might like to come and join the Conscious Masculine, my men's community. We're working on this stuff as a group. There's tons of good guys in there. We're all in the same boat, struggling, supporting each other, having that brotherhood for accountability and to push us in doing this work, because it can be a very lonely path. I've built an extensive online course called The Legendary Lover, which is all about fixing this issue, fixing erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, and really learning how to become epic in the bedroom. All of the techniques and practices that I've discussed here are sort of encoded in that, and I teach a very systematic approach to integrating all this stuff, so you don't just have to struggle with all of the sort of moving parts and get it lined up. It's made sort of systematic and easy to follow for you, so you might like to be a part of that. And I've got a few more spaces for one-on-one coaching this year. I've had a lot of guys joining recently, jumping into the work, and that's awesome. If you do feel like you need a mentor, someone to guide you and help you integrate all of this stuff and to fix the problems that you're facing, you might like to apply for one-on-one coaching with me. It's really my favorite part of this work is developing deep relationships with you guys and being able to mentor you and guide your process, and it's just so rewarding. So and that's where I see the men making the biggest leaps, when they invest in getting really sort of customized guidance with this stuff. And if you want, if that resonates with you, just check out the links below. You can book a call and we can connect properly and see if it fits. Lastly, I just want to leave you with this. I really used to view my premature ejaculation as like an absolute curse, like my Achilles heel. It was the part of myself that I hated. But as I started to work on myself, I saw that this pain was actually an incredible motivator. That pain pushed me to search for the answers that I've achieved and that I've discovered. And without that, I wouldn't be where I am today, sharing all of my insights here with you. So I'm conscious that behind every painful point and struggle and challenge that we have in our lives as men is an amazing silver lining. Never forget that. At this stage, I've seen so many men use this issue as a intense catalyst for massive transformation, as a way of bootstrapping themselves and unlocking a new approach towards life. I've also seen so many men, not so many, but I've seen quite a few guys sort of fail in this because they simply didn't go all in. They didn't do the necessary work. They gave up before they saw the results. And they lacked that real determination and persistence towards the end goal. I'm not trying to sugarcoat this for you guys. I'm trying to give you a realistic expectation of what it takes. It takes daily dedication, consistent action and steps. But within a few months of hard work, you can have the experience of breaking through, of overcoming this, of making a massive leap. And that is totally worth all the effort that you put in. And as I've described, that's one of the best parts of it for me, is that own massive transformation in my life was just such a game changer. And I've seen other men who have got to that point where they broke through, and then we celebrate that victory together. Amazing. It's one of the greatest gifts for me of doing this work, is seeing men who get it, who persevere, who push, and who break through and experience the breakthrough. And we get to share that and celebrate that and, revel in the victory. So if you're a man who suffers from premature ejaculation, if this is your Achilles heel, or you're just a man who wants to make love with much more freedom and step into much greater levels of control and pleasure in lovemaking, you should absolutely do this work to unlock that capacity, because it's going to give you a level of strength and confidence and command within yourself to truly enjoy the bedroom and the intimacy with your relationship and with your partner like never before. So make this commitment to yourself right now, knowing that sexual freedom is totally possible, so you can start to unlock your full sexual potential as a man and become a legendary lover.